So the theory is that the A is this series of separate fiefdoms, the smallest fiefdom being the unit, and then you get other fiefdoms like landscape urbanism, DRL, and they never kind of communicate. So the idea is this Wednesday of the open week, there's sort of three events. The first one is to do the AA's reputation as a centre of experiment, creativity and aberrant behaviour by asking tutors or students to go to the archive and select a project that they think represents the AA in this respect. So the second thing was it has a reputation around computing, particularly coming from John Fraser, who was the first architecture tutor to have a studio that was totally dominated by the computer. I had three people who represent three different views of computing. One is John Fraser, who's not here anymore, Patrick Schumacher, and Mike Weinstock. John insisted on a format. He said only if the word computer was never mentioned, and it was about the future and not the past. In other words, what next? The other restriction was each of them would have to make a sort of 2 to 3 minute film stating their position, and then those films would become the subject of the discussion. The third thing is a lecture about what experiment actually means. This is the one that's the loosest at the moment. And then there's Stefan. We don't know what he's going to do. I really want students to be involved in it, if not all of it, at least some of it. And so look, you could say to me, look, you don't want that, don't want to do that, David, let's do this or that.
With the first session, the one where the people visit the archives and bring up projects, who's bringing the projects? Who's looking for the projects?
Well, you can suggest people. I've sent notes out. Some people who've declared an interest, Hugo Hinsley. I've tried to see people from different areas.
Yeah.
Martin Self, I'm waiting to hear from. Saskia Lewis is really keen from Foundation.
Yeah.
A technical tutor called Lay. Well, I think we'd better hear something from Stefan, who's already got doing something that week.
So, it's going to be a 5-day series of interventions and kind of open lab where I'm bringing about 20 different dancers, choreographers, a couple of musicians to work with whoever wants from the school. There's no cap on numbers, and it's a lot about merging how to create collectives and how to create group dynamics and this kind of fluctuating between pedestrian and non-pedestrian behavior on a social level, and look at different models of what we have in terms of being together within a room, whether it's a lecture or a symposium or a conversation or in a museum or a church or a hospital, going into these scenarios and starting to shift how people move, how people behave, how people interact, with a focus on inclusivity in that anyone can enter the situation. So where this kind of overlaps with what David's been planning is to pick one lecture, which at the minute will, I think, either be Charles or Mark Cousins, to talk about experiment, and I plan to go into that situation and then shift it entirely.
For that first session in the morning of the presentation of work from the archives, from a sort of selected body, what's the sort of plan? Do you have an idea in mind of like how that's going to go, like in terms of call and response? Or I just wonder whether or not you could do it so that you have sort of two people together presenting a project in a way and saying, I think this is experimental, someone else says, I think this is experimental, and then you create a sort of, a sort of room for debate, I guess, between there. Might encourage people to get a bit more vocal.
But it's sort of how can you as students possess it? Because of course when the tutors like me get involved, they're always kind of choreograph it in some way. And I would rather, you need a bit of structure, but after that,
We come to listen to you in this place. The only time I've ever seen anyone have a conversation when there wasn't a single teacher in the room.
oh really, among students you mean?
And then it
Yeah.
really gets going.
Yeah, no, I can. Well, maybe tutors should be banned from one of these sessions. Not allowed.
Why do you think that is, Jimmy?
Why?
Like, why
Because-
not the inability to speak or to discuss things if it's obvious?
I think there's a number of presumptions we have about each other that aren't exactly on the table in front of teachers. And when the teachers can leave, we can scream directly at each other, informed by what we presume about each other. And I don't think that teachers necessarily should be privy to this type of perception of ourselves. So
We should also think about what to do in the actual open jury, because I think what we tried to veer off, we tried to veer away from last year was the idea that the students present was just like another jury for the students. And I think we also could think about how to engage that this year.
And that the work is selected by the tutors always for the open juries as well.
Yeah, it's always
sort of
one student of the unit that presents his work, and then, or that's what, and then it's just another jury for those people, and nobody really cares.
Yeah, I mean, one of the
Exactly.
things, even last year at the open jury, when it was like this tutors sort of supposed to be this like open debate. Like, I was moderating one of those things, and it was bloody horrible. Like, it was really tenuous because you'd try and ask somebody a question that should generate some kind of response, but a lot of those tutors are very cagey in that scenario and really don't give anything away, or just sort of are happy to sort of bungle along for half an hour and then get off for lunch. I mean, I don't know, there is something definitely to be said of like getting out of the AA as well. Perhaps, I mean, is there a way to just like go all through to the evening on this day or something? We go like, alright, we're off, let's go down the road for something else.
Yes.
I don't know, maybe we can move it around.
I mean, we could just pick a place and not really create a program necessarily announced for it and say, I don't know, open jury is taking place at this and this church and wherever, and we do something there. Like, something about also the idea of takeover, because a lot of this is like maybe taking over existing structures or like shifting and like physically taking over maybe a space, and not so much. I think like showing each other work on open day has become irrelevant. And
for a number of years.
like, if anything, like there could be something about like if there's these micro fiefdoms or whatever, is there a difference between how we're working? Like, is there anything for us to learn from one another if we're already separated into these rooms in terms of how we approach what we're doing in this place as a question? Whether everyone ends up doing the same. It's like if you had to show a group of people how you work, not like what you're making or like what your products and drawings look like. Like, how are you engaging as a group of human beings in the space?
Maybe some of it is just too many people. Like those DRL juries where they have like 12 critics, the room is packed out.
I get quite nervous.
I think that's one of the reasons why the arguments between the jurors failed to get off, was because there were 12 of them. So they could all instantly just like say a little bit, and the next person say a little bit. So it was, they didn't have to ever get into a real argument.
They all give a mini lecture.
They all
don't
just
they?
give a little mini lecture, and they just
And
aren't
then-
replying, but very
Yes.
polite and everything. I mean, one of the reasons I was disappointed with it, I mean, maybe other people didn't want this, but I kind of wanted them to be a bit more combative, because we know they do really disagree. I was actually thinking of like a space rather than the church, like why not put them in a boxing ring? Like actually put them in like a really kind of a
Why
space
can't it
where
be
it's
Hostile.
But why is this just about the
Hostile.
tutors
Tutors
too? I mean, like,
Criticising the tutor's position, because I could argue you're defaulting into the personality cult of tutors, but rather than you questioning them or.
Well, it could be very interesting as well to
Just becomes a
have
birthday party.
a whole series of different things going on throughout the course of that day, running on until
Is it illegal to drink alcohol?
late into the evening. That's all called open
No, it's city
jury,
London.
Yes.
and it's all
So like, for instance, just have impromptu like student meetings during the day, because that would counterbalance that whole stupid one tutor arguing with another and everybody
Yeah,
watching
essentially.
them.
Isn't that?
I think probably the one time of year when I meet more students from all over this school, and probably learn more about the way in which it operates and everybody's studio operates and what people actually do, is in the last 2 weeks of term when nobody's studying anymore and everyone's building exhibition and they're hanging out at the bar.
Yes.
Maybe I'm being cynical, but the only reason that is because then it becomes a communal effort and nobody really gives a shit anymore.
What's the radio thing?
Started radio a couple of years ago with David and Lindsay and Patrick for the AAA. I think it's all ready to go.
Yes.
Just have to start it again for this year.
Was it broadcast live?
It was. We had some difficulties with broadcasting rights, but the way it works nicely is there's sort of a quite selected or curated archive of recent talks and events.
You have an internet radio here.
There is one. There's a station set up, and they also have some sort of FM channel as well. I thought that they paid a license for, but I don't know if they have the power to actually broadcast it very far outside the AA. But the internet radio.
We have a
thing
pirate
is-
radio expert.
I'm a failed expert. I know how.
Yes, but Jack, don't
Couple
you have to
blue.
make a presentation?
I do, yeah, next time.
But we could force you to do it this time.
Dribble off a bit. Well, yeah,
It's a performance, isn't it?
that's- Yeah, performance event all happening. And no time of day or number of people or audience specified at all.
Bruce used to have those breakfast meetings, didn't he?
We still have the breakfast.
You still have them?
Yeah, we used to have breakfast meetings at 8 o'clock. And actually, the first guest was Cedric Price.
Mm.
They are still doing it at the Slade and out with the Slade. So there was one 3 weeks ago at the APT gallery. But it might be quite a nice one to try and combine a breakfast meeting with the AA as well.
As I understand it, I did go to one. They're very informal.
They are very informal. It's
Yes.
breakfast.
Mm.
But it's quite nice to meet and just to have a bit of a chat before the day sort of starts.
Yes,
It usually packs in about half.
but you have to bring your own croissant, don't you?
Well, yeah. Sometimes. Well, Gary Wigley has just made a portable kitchen,
Oh.
which means
Oh.
which you can heat everything. We had a big fry up at the first
Mm.
one with it, which was quite good. So that can go anywhere.
What if it's
Okay.
what if it's just all breakfast? You only have a breakfast meeting, a lunch meeting, and then a dinner meeting together,
Yeah.
and then drinks, and everything in between, all the kind of meat is actually filler. You kind of flip that.
Asleep.
Yeah, that's sleep. Yeah.
Well, you mean the whole day of it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Breakfast meeting, a lunch meeting, and a dinner meeting.
There's a nice event
Times.
sometime there, I think, isn't there?
Yeah. No, I like that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Once you have the food, you don't have the screen, you don't have the
Yeah.
laptop, you can't do your drawing while you're eating.
Yeah.
See, when I was studying with David, we did the very same thing. I come back from wherever I managed to find it, had some bit of prosciutto or something,
Oh yes, you did.
and I
Yes.
will come and make sandwiches on mass. So
Yeah,
20,
try to
30,
solve.
40 sandwiches. I'll wrap them all in a page,
News-
one page at a
newspaper.
time.
Yeah.
You have to talk about the times and everything because it's sitting in lap someone. That's the one constraint. The second is if you feel generous, you put a quid or two in the jar, and it always came out above.
But it sort of acknowledges what the AA is designed for as well. It's like a dwelling, for like entertaining people, and like the fiefdom itself was created by the separateness of the school, or at least that's what a lot of people like to talk to it as. So like actually using it for a place to have dinner seems to be pretty.
Dinner sounds
nice
good. That's
idea.
probably the tough one. Really, the kitchen's going to be closed.
But couldn't you just set up like a long table, or kind of do it formally, like have a banquet that lasts? You have like breakfast, and you bring in a full breakfast, like, and you.
Yeah, everyone brings
and
their
so
own.
it's like a full kind of a bit mad.
But we're
like-
craving informal conversation by having a really formal
Yeah, exactly.
dinner table.
Yeah, exactly. Because like, obviously not everyone will be able to fit, so it'll become this slightly kind of straight. And like you say about the AA, you have these very beautiful rooms which would have had dining tables in them, and a kind of like, you're somehow using the space for what it was originally intended for domestically, but it becomes a kind of rather disruptive thing. I mean, if you do it in the library, I don't know, which is a beautiful space, which may have once been a dining room, I don't know, and you suddenly set up
Ballroom.
a dining room table, you're like a kind of ballroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
There's one
We have a dinner then, don't
dinner a year like that. Yes,
Yeah.
the council dinner.
Well, you volunteered to set this up.
Should we do it?
well,
Good job, Ryan.
I need help.
Put it
I'll
on
help
the
you, Lauren.
table
So
and
I'm
just-
thinking- I'm also-
just see what happens.
I was
spin
thinking
them.
actually of
There's tables in there already.
Yeah.
Yes.
what's the Louis Buñuel film where they can't leave the
Avenging Angel.
and so like they're stuck in this dinner and they kind of have to talk to each other and it exposes all their weaknesses and they all
Yeah.
start hating each other and murdering each other and
Yeah.
and that's because they're at this formal dinner they can't escape. So
We can try
But
that.
I think there's actually maybe something interesting about serving food, like rather than having a buffet, which then becomes something that we all like. That happens at the school anyway. That the buffet is like, but actually sitting down and serving food and doing it like a kind of banquet or something. There is something about that that may be kind of interesting. Yeah, we're not.
I don't know whether you'd be able to do it in the library. There might be a sort of
Code.
policy about food, mightn't there?
The problem with the library that what for lunch was that they built this new kind of the new desk that they built where they suddenly can't fit all the tables in. That's what they said because the council lunch last time was like just like the little tables and like finger food.
Yeah, it was rubbish. So we're deciding a date now. We can do breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah, I think it'd be quite good to do.
We can get the details sorted in.
Well, the lecture hall is a large public place. It opens right up at 6. That's
Yes,
Just
you
push
could
all the
book
chairs.
that.
push all the way. Well, would we?
And do people just sign up, or is
Yeah,
this
that's
sort of
right.
do
Yeah.
people sit down when you know you
just gotta
say,
grab a chair.
yeah, dinner served at
Once the
6
table's
p.m.
full, the
first
doors are
come
locked.
first grab.
Let's just do it. What day?
Do we need to check with what dates we can do?
Would it be
Well, if you
doing-
want lecture, you need to know when it's free all day and into the evening, don't you?
I think it should be convivial.
Yeah.
But I think it can be instructive, but like instructive in the sense that it's easier to sit down and eat rather than go into. You know what I mean? Like it's more that it gets in your way by wanting you to sit down. Like
Instruction be to the running of the day of the school.
Yeah.
Can we get Fergus Henderson to do it for us?
That's good.
He's an
Fergus
alumni,
St.
isn't he?
John's
Yeah.
to do it for us.
Yeah.
Fergus.
Right.
Yeah.
He should be on. Can we get him on that list with Francisca Shoes and Patrick Schumacher?
I was thinking that it's somehow important that it's here, and that it's like real food, as opposed to being sandwiches, and also not in St John's, because then it's just a trip to St John's. You know, like, I think it has to be here. It
This
has
one
to
I
be
was just
Oh,
thinking
right,
about
right.
the
Oh,
whole committee.
We can all
You're
do it.
talking Jesus proportions. You need to hold 20 fish.
Yeah.
Just get 20 mackerel from the manga.
That's 20 people though.
20.
Yeah, that would be for lunch.
Do
and we could have,
croissants
like
for
a-
breakfast and we do sandwiches for
Yeah.
lunch.
Porridge.
No,
Porridge.
lunch has got to be. I think it's got to be a little bit.
Certain people. Maybe it's dressed up as a kind of open invite with a +1 for a non-AA member. Because if this thing is about exposure and proving what the AA is about, you want as many
Definitely.
non-AA people, invite them into dinner, invite them into breakfast, invite them into lunch.
Well,
But in a way, it'd be quite nice if, like, you know, a bunch of old people who were in the AA, from like people who were on your list, and they turned up. Maybe they might end up sitting at the end of one table all chatting together. But that would be kind of interesting. But then they would like get broken up by students sitting down, and so it's more that they kind of like just happen to like take part rather than sort of having a specific table where you can join them, you know, for a conversation, which is a bit like.
Yeah, I also kind of like the idea that all the sort of proceedings of the dinner are quite formal, but then the actual who sits where is
Is left totally, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe we should invite everyone in under false pretenses for a very formal thank you AA event, and then say, I'm sorry, we're having some difficulties, please come sit down in our hospitality wing, lay the spread, we hope it's at your convenience.
In the canteen, but it's a celebration of the National Festival of Chinese, so there are a couple of Chinese students in the AA that just wear the mask, the cameras, but they serve a really, really horrible, terrible Chinese food. So I'm thinking, if that were really thinking about the quality of the food, I mean,
Yes.
really, it is a really nice food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody.
Okay.
So
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, 1 o'clock.
I think that's
Sounds good.